Welcome to I Just Have Something to Say. My name is George. I'm a first-generation Hispanic American, a U.S. Army veteran, former paramedic firefighter, and concealed weapons carrier for over 20 years. We discuss how to make things better in the area of crime and crime prevention, the Second Amendment, and police accountability. But before we dive into this video, I'd like to ask for your help in making this channel grow by giving us a like, subscribe, and by sharing this video. Today we're going to be reviewing a video out of Australia because so many people on the left think that once they get rid of guns, crime will just simply evaporate and the world will be a utopia and unicorns and butterflies will be all over the place and it could be nothing further from the truth. And you know you're in serious trouble when liberals refer to slogans like failing is failing. Let's dive into this video and see if you can pick up on all the things that I've noticed that simply is just liberal dribble.
The Queensland Government's youth offender reforms have received scrutiny from legal and criminal justice experts. The changes unveiled yesterday include a requirement that courts consider juvenile bail history when sentencing, harsher sentences for crimes committed at night, and a new maximum penalty for stealing a car. Some have branded the measures a public relations stunt, arguing courts already take into account an offender's track record. The reforms follow the alleged murder of Queensland mother Emma Lovell by two teenagers with prior criminal histories. And
to give some context, this married couple, they were stabbed to death in their homes by two teenagers during a home invasion robbery.
Emma's law petition walk calling for change to bail conditions will take place tomorrow. For more on this, joining me live now is Mindy Satiri from the Justice Reform Initiative. Mindy, I appreciate your time today. What are your thoughts on the proposed changes?
Look, what the Justice Reform Initiative is really clear about is that jailing is failing.
Let me be clear. I don't understand liberals and how they can be an expert in anything and distill all of their deepest thoughts into a bumper sticker. You know you're screwed when a liberal has no answer and all they can give you is a damn slogan.
And the threat of harsher penalties, although tempting to go into that space in the face of such tragedy, does not, in fact, make the community safer. There's a huge amount of evidence that says sending children to prison does not work to achieve any of the crime control functions that the community quite rightly would expect. It does not work to rehabilitate, it does not work to deter, and it doesn't work to build a safer community. So what we're saying is that we need to take a very clear-eyed view at the evidence about what actually works to reduce offending and what actually works to build safer communities.
It is good to know that liberals in Australia work off the same playbook as liberals in the United States. Children, poor, innocent children that are getting placed in jail. You know, the 16 and 17 and 18-year-old that are carjacking and raping and doing home invasions, those are just poor, innocent victims of a failed society. Let me tell you something. I had 4 kids and none of them did this crap. When I was 17, I was going through basic training in the Army. So don't call these children. These are young adults that are making really hideous, bad decisions that are impacting society as a whole. But it makes me sick that they keep counting young adults as poor, innocent children that are being incarcerated for poor behavior.
If it doesn't work, what is the impact of incarceration on young people?
We know that incarceration is in fact what you would call criminogenic. That is, the experience of incarceration makes it more likely that somebody will go on to reoffend, not less likely. We know that the vast majority of children that are currently incarcerated in Queensland will go on to reoffend in the 12 months after their release. It is not working to achieve the goal of community safety. We saw today, even in the Australian newspaper, the point being made that putting often children that have come from circumstances of extreme disadvantage and vulnerability in prison, which is further traumatising, in fact increases the likelihood of them going on to commit further crimes in the future. I know how tempting it is, and the Justice Reform Initiative recognises how deeply the community feels about trying to keep the community safe. But what we're saying is that we need to look outside of prisons and we need to look outside of the threat of harsher penalties to actually achieve this. There's a huge amount of evidence about what actually does work to keep the community safe, and most of that evidence are around community-led programs that operate outside of the justice system.
Okay, I consider myself a fairly reasonable person. And if you're talking about things like school choice, alternative schools, counseling, family counseling, but if you notice one thing, she says there's tons of data out there, but she didn't cite one example of where her theories work. And in the real world, where we all have to live with the consequences of liberal decisions like this and being soft on crime, is that you may get carjacked, you may get robbed, you may be subject to a home invasion. So when the tire meets the road, show me where this is working anywhere on planet Earth, and then we can start talking about it.
Doctor, is there an obvious solution here? What could be done?
There are multiple reforms at multiple points along the justice system trajectory and, in fact, prior to engagement with the justice system that absolutely have a very clear evidence base about reducing crime and building community safety. So there are reforms, for instance, at the point of policing, pre-charge diversion. There are reforms at the point of courts, specialist courts that actually build sort of acknowledging the drivers of incarceration into the sentencing options. There are reforms at the point of prison itself, what could or should be happening when children and young people are in custody, and there are reforms at the point of post-release. There isn't a magic reform fix, but this is an entirely solvable problem. What we know is that we spend billions of dollars in Australia on prisons each year when they do not work to do any of the things that they are intended to.
Look, I grew up in a poor neighborhood on the north side of Miami, and prisons do exactly what they should be doing, which is keeping bad people away from the good people. Because alternatively, what she doesn't have a clue about is where I grew up, you let the criminals out onto the streets and people don't like to leave their neighborhoods. They don't like leaving their homes at night. They live with bars on the windows, bars on the doors. They live with big fences around their homes, hoping that every night someone isn't going to break into their car. And they live in fear because they don't know who may try to break in their house.
Yet we spend very little money on the kinds of community-led alternatives that also have a very clear evidence base. There are also reforms that are accessible to us immediately at the point of early intervention, at the point of early prevention, and also in terms of those community-led alternatives that I was talking about. We absolutely know what works to reduce incarceration. We just are lacking the political will at the moment to make it happen. So the Justice Reform Initiative are really encouraging, I guess, all of our political leaders to start acknowledging what the evidence actually says about what will keep the community safe.
Well, you just touched on my next question. What would you like to see the Queensland government do over the next few years?
Look, I think that there are some green shoots of acknowledgement that the system really needs an overhaul. We need to stop investing in prisons. We need to stop this sort of sinking of money into something that doesn't work and start looking at putting those kinds of resources into community-based alternatives. At the moment, it costs more than $600,000 a year to keep a child in custody in Queensland.
I don't know what their incarceration system looks like in Australia, but if they do have a for-profit system and they're making $600K per year per child, that's a huge incentive for the system to perpetuate itself and not remediate the problems that are generating this kind of problems within their society. I would say probably the same thing's going on right within the United States. In fact, I will say that the for-profit policing, judicial system, and prisons are a large part of what's making crime go through the roof in the United States.
Queensland is currently incarcerating more children than any other state or territory in Australia. Imagine what would happen if we actually invested that $600,000 into those evidence-based, community-led alternatives that we know will actually reduce incarceration. So what we're saying is that please let's take a breath, acknowledge, of course, that an incredible tragedy has occurred, but also acknowledge that good policy and making the community safer does not happen in this knee-jerk response way.
One of the things that bothers me the most about liberals is that they really don't care about the victims of violent crimes. I completely understand where she's coming from. You don't put non-violent offenders in jail. People who are addicted to drugs, people who have a little bit of pot on them. Who cares? You leave this space open for violent criminals. You turn away from your own human nature. Something that we all know intuitively, that when you have a violent criminal someone who's capable of killing. You want to segregate them from society. This is something that's been ingrained into us for our own safety and security for thousands of years. But to be told to ignore common sense, and then even though she mentions all the data, we know what works, and she's so confident, but yet she doesn't mention, but to blindly say, forget about the victims, ignore your intuition, and trust me, I've got all the answers. I'm sorry. You look at every major city in America that's run by liberals, and they are criminal hellholes. And it's only getting worse.
It happens by really carefully and thoughtfully looking at what the evidence says. So we're encouraging political leadership, we're encouraging the community to really also start thinking about what is it that is really going to make the community safer. And we know that we need to look at the social drivers of incarceration if we actually want to reduce crime.
And it's really funny that this expert doesn't mention anything about holding criminals accountable for their action. It's always, we got to do something at the society level. Society is at fault. Society put that knife in that young man's hand. Society put a gun in that person's young hand. It's BS. Yeah, there are things that we can do to change the trajectory of some young people's lives. But once they cross that line, the only way to change future behavior is to hold them accountable for the actions that they've taken, so they know that the consequences are so great they don't wish to do whatever they did again. Be safe, make sure to carry safely and legally, and always be ready to defend yourself and those that you love. Thank you for visiting. Please like and subscribe and share this video.